Sometimes you have to feel things. So I think as a human being, this is an inevitability. I can't really comment on any other species because I've never been any other species. I like to think that animals feel things too. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit off track already, less than 30 seconds into this video. So there's a couple of different things that come to mind when I think about this topic. So I guess the first time I really got thinking about this in any great detail was through work as a healthcare professional. So I qualified as a doctor. So I finished medical school in 2007. And I worked in the NHS for 15 years. Worked my way through all the grades. I spent a year working in New Zealand, all that kind of stuff. So I knew, I think everyone goes through all the kind of idealistic stuff when they first plan on going into any kind of branch of like caring professions, because we all have that in common. All of the different caring professions in hospital and out of hospital is that you're dealing with other human beings, sometimes at their worst possible time, really. So I think you kind of know it's going to be difficult at times, what you have to sort of see and deal with on a daily basis at work, but you kind of accept that that's part of the job when you go into it, and and you do steel yourself for that. I think it's very hard though to actually know what you're facing until you're actually really presented with it. And there'll be big things will happen, and there'll be small things that happen. And what I always found, particularly through my experiences of working in emergency medicine, so of my years working in an A&E department, was that there was very good recognition that certain events were potentially quite emotional and traumatic. And the classic thing was always, on the fortunately rare occasion where you had to deal with something like a very sick child, or a child death. Any death is difficult, but certainly the situations that you don't deal with very often can be the hardest ones. So we were always very good at recognizing that those kind of situations were potentially traumatic and difficult. I certainly, even now, we're probably talking about 12, 13 years ago, I still think back to, the most traumatic experience in my career, which, I wouldn't kind of get into it too much, but it was around a kind of pediatric case, because I don't want to trigger anyone. And I still think back to that now as the single worst point in my career, and that wasn't when I worked in A&E. But these things do stay with you. That's 12, 13 years ago, and I still think of that now. So yeah, those things we recognise as, these are difficult. You need to take time, talk to people, debrief, all that kind of stuff. We're not quite so good with doing that on the kind of day-to-day stuff, because you talk to some people and you see some people that have had a really difficult life, are going through some really, really difficult things, are quite blatantly living through some really, really difficult emotional, sometimes physical trauma, sometimes a combination of the two. And you take some of that with you as well, especially if you're a bit more inclined to the empathic side of things. And I always used to say, breaking bad news to families was always a thing that, I endeavoured to do as well as I possibly could, as I did with every part of my job. But I used to kind of say, especially when I was doing it quite a lot, that, I felt like I left part of myself in that situation where I was having to break some bad news to people. And especially the more you're doing it, yes, you get better at it, but it doesn't necessarily get easier. Like, you get slicker at it, but it doesn't mean you feel it any less. So I used to come out of some of these situations really kind of feeling it, but then actually, I had to turn myself around and continue on with my job a lot of the time, because I didn't have another choice. And I think it's, if you don't talk to your colleagues about it or people at home about it, if you kind of push it down a little bit, which is what I used to do, it pops up in really random places. So I used to find myself there would be something mildly emotional on the TV, and I would almost be on the verge of tears at something fairly minor. I think over time I kind of recognised I was like, that's not really normal. And I think it was just purely because I was pushing things down quite a lot. And that was, I then tried to make myself a bit more of an open book, and that I would come home and I would talk to my other half about it because, she's not medical, but she works in a profession that has its fair share of, traumas associated with it as well. So we talk to each other about it, and it does help. And I think obviously, depending on how you're dealing with it, it may be that you need to talk to a professional about it as well. And I think it's just kind of taking a moment to pause and recognize that, this is what I'm feeling. And if you don't recognize what you're feeling, then, you might need to practice, or you might need some help a little bit with it. And that's where, naming it can be quite helpful as well. I recognize that I don't feel right today. What exactly is it that I'm feeling? Is it, do I feel a bit depressed? Do I feel sad? It doesn't matter. Like find a name for it that feels right, and go, okay, yeah, no, I think this is, I am sad, I am depressed, I am, anxious, whatever it may be. So I think applying a name to it then, and just allowing yourself to feel these things as well. Like, don't feel that you need to stick a cork in that bottle, shove it all in that bottle and stick a cork in it, because I think these feelings will find a way to manifest. And sometimes those things can manifest as physical problems as well. So it's getting into that habit of, you don't need to do what everyone else around you does. And I think that as healthcare professionals, I think it's maybe getting a bit better now, but it's quite challenged by the pressures on the system. And with best will in the world, everyone has the best intentions, but no one really has the time, or no one feels like they have the time to be able to stop and think and feel. Um, so that's kind of the work-related example. And then the other example is a bit more personal, but it was more to do with, and I apologise if there's any of my close family members watching this, but we lost our mum, my mum, between 2 and 3 years ago now, and that was a really difficult time. That was kind of mid lockdowns and pandemic and everything else that was going on at the time, and obviously it's a really difficult thing to go through. And you kind of don't really know how to navigate it. And I had really good support from the people who were around me at the time. Um, but I remember you want to be there to support the other people with you as well. And remember thinking, my mum and dad were together for a very long time, and I know Dad's probably watching this, so apologies if this is upsetting. But yeah, I remember watching my dad and how he was dealing with it after so long together. Um, and I think initially, there was a lot of emotion, obviously, but then I kind of observed him going into this very busy mode. Organize, 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 get things sorted. And I think I said this to him, and I said, I think, you're keeping yourself really busy at the moment, but eventually you're going to run out of busy work to do, and you're going to get hit with this like a tidal wave of emotion. So please, can you find some time to stop and feel what's going on? Just because otherwise you're going to get hit, with this like a tsunami. Um, and again, I don't know. Um, I don't know, there's no rules or regulations for this. We know about there's models of grief and all this kind of stuff, but we know that people don't necessarily follow them in a predictable order. So it's very kind of individual how you deal with it. But yeah, I just think sometimes it's important just to recognise that you have to feel things. There's no bypass around these things. There's no get out. There's no loopholes. You figure out a way to manage it that works for you. Um, it's like that. I heard an example in an audiobook I was listening to where they said it's like the wave coming towards you. Do you fight against the wave, or do you try and relax and allow the water to move you a little bit and wrap around you a little bit? So I like to think of it a little bit like that. Just relax and feel it. It might not be pleasant, but allow yourself to experience it, and then allow yourself to process it. So very deep and meaningful for this time in the morning. But let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next one.